Relate with Rissa. And on today's episode, we will be discussing prenatal mental health. And I have such a special guest here with me, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Dr. Olymphia O'Neale-White. Oh my gosh, excited to be here, Rissa.
So, you guys, this is the first time we got another social worker on the podcast for today. And I'm super excited because prenatal mental health is such a prevalent topic that we should be talking about over and over again because it affects the Black women at higher rates than any other race across the board. And I have Miss Dr. O'Neale White here to discuss with us some preventative methods, some things to consider, because this is her wheelhouse, this is her specialty, and we are here to learn from Miss Dr. O'Neale White. All right, so let's just jump into it because we need to talk about it. So, can we first start off? Because something that's really important is helping people understand, first off, what is prenatal mental health? What does that even mean?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I think in order to define perinatal mental health, I really have to define what the perinatal period is at all, right? And when we talk about the perinatal period, it is the period um, starting at preconception, going all the way to age 3 following the birth of a child, going up to age 3. So the perinatal period is basically the period within a individual or woman's life, birthing person, depends on the terminology you want to use, right? That once they make the decision that they want to move forward in getting pregnant, right? Or even they make this decision that they want to engage in family planning, right? Family planning can look like birth control. It can look like whatever, right? Having effective and good sex. The perinatal period describes that period from preconception all the way to age 3. So it's a very, very big and broad period.
So speaking of from conception until age 3, that prenatal. So like you said, that's the beginning part of it. And then we add in the mental health component. And
Yeah.
mental health can entail a multitude of disorders that
Mm-hmm.
women are either already have or susceptible to have with the onset of pregnancy because of all the hormone shifts that we have. So within your experience, what are some of those common mental health diagnoses you see the most prevalent within women from that conception period until their child is 3 years of age?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I guess the bigger statistic would be related to postpartum depression and baby blues, right?
Okay.
Those are some really prevalent diagnoses that women and, contrary to popular belief, men, the male
Mm.
partner or female partner, depending on how this woman floats, right? That partners and the birthing person can experience following the birth of a child, or even, following the passing of a child. Because I think it's really important to put out there that once a woman becomes pregnant, those hormones begin to change, right? That HCG and all the other levels start to rise and increase. And regardless of how that pregnancy yields, whether we're talking about a miscarriage, a stillbirth, or a birth that results in a NICU stay, or a birth that results in a happy family taking a healthy baby home, all of those women still are within that postpartum period and are likely to experience different things related to that period.
Wow. So, just as you mentioned, postpartum and baby blues, those are definitely the top because even though I am not within that expertise, of course, I specialize in trauma with Black women, and part of that trauma is even the medical trauma that comes within that period, their pregnancy, because we know for Black women, it's a danger to carry life.
Yeah.
So the women that are able to endure endure that entire process, to have that baby, whether it was a good pregnancy or a very negative one, they risk their lives to do so. But what I see the most as well is postpartum, and it comes with so many different layers because you said to three, but is it possible even to their child to the age of 5?
Yeah.
Or,
So
or
depending,
mother?
on the organization, the definition period, is from, preconception all the way to 3. But many organizations have expanded that age where they're looking at it up until age 5, just because it continues to be prevalent, right? And there are many other perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. We in the field call it PMADs, right? So there's many other disorders or diagnoses that, folks can experience during this period following the birth of a child. So even though postpartum depression and baby blues are very prevalent, you could have a person experiencing postpartum anxiety, postpartum OCD. Yep, it's a thing. Postpartum PTSD, right? From traumatic birth experiences, because as I'm sure you know, the body keeps the score.
Yes.
It does not matter whether we're talking about, reoffending of a sexual assault, right? Or whether we're talking about birthing a child. The body does not recognize a difference. So it's, a lot of folks can experience these adverse birthing experiences, or even medical trauma where they're experiencing these adverse things within their medical settings, not being heard by their doctors, their experiences being dismissed or pacified, or not being able to have access to quality care due to their geographic location or their socioeconomic status or barriers, language, race. There's so many different things attached to it. So people experience a lot of these different types of disorders. And I think it's really important that we consider these disorders while also considering that life is ghetto. People come into pregnancy in different stages of life, right? I may or may not have a mental health condition stepping into pregnancy. So what does it look like for me to go through pregnancy, achieve a pregnancy, complete a pregnancy, and then experience postpartum?
Exactly. So that is a really good question that I would like to ask you, because 1 in 5 women, so not even focusing just on the black women, 1 in 5 women will develop prenatal mental health, right? So like you said, if you are a black woman and you're not predisposed to it, you haven't had any struggles with mental health, how do you know that you are now within this stage and this is something that you should inquire about, you should get help about, you should get support on? Like, how do they know? What are those signs, those symptoms, those early warning signs that they need to go to their doctor and have a deeper conversation?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I guess in order to explain that, we can really walk through the period, right? So
Okay.
anytime, it's actually required for docs to screen pregnant persons during their pregnancy period for, at the very minimum, safety and depression, right? There's also a specialized screener that's used to screen pregnant persons for anxiety, right? Because these are 3 very prominent things that come up. And even post birth, right? A lot of people have this misconception that every pregnant woman is just experiencing baby blues. And let me kind of explain the difference between baby blues and postpartum depression, right? So, baby blues is not a DSM 5 diagnosis. It is a coined diagnosis between the mental health and medical profession that talks about a woman's experience following the birth of the child, right? Or the completion of pregnancy, rather, right? And the come down from the hormones that they've developed over that 9 months. That's what baby blues is. So that come down can result in anxiety. It can result in depressed mood. It can result in irritability, right? It can result in a lack of interest in doing things. But the thing about baby blues is it normally doesn't span any further than 2 to 3 weeks, right?
Okay.
So if we're talking about baby blues, this is 2 to 3 weeks. This is something that's going to alleviate once the hormones start to regulate again.
Okay.
But when we talk about postpartum depression, right? This is anything beyond that 2 to 3 weeks. So, I when I consult with, folks and they're like, hey, this client, 2 months that's your indicator right there. The moment you said anything beyond 2 to 3 weeks, it no longer meets the non-diagnostic criteria of baby blues. This is now someone who's experiencing postpartum depression. So paying attention to that timeline is so important, but also considering the health of the person coming into the pregnancy, and then the experiences that the person is verbalizing to you. So if this person is verbalizing any psychotic experiences at all, right? Any mania, anything like that, there's obviously something going on that needs to be assessed. So if we're seeing things, hearing things, or responding to things everybody else might not be able to see or hear, there's something going on. If you are having active thoughts of harming yourself or your child, right? There's something going on that needs to be assessed. If you notice that your irritability does not have a limit, right? Like, because, such a life transition, I can imagine a mom getting irritated. You just did all that work, girl. Yes, you tired, right? But I often tell folks, if you feel like you need to lay in the bed for days at a time and you have disinterest in doing things, including the basic care of yourself, something is going on, right? And usually partners peep it sooner than the individual themselves. But usually when those things are addressed, it's very important to consider your follow-up. Tell your doctor, hey, something isn't right. Don't know, but I would like to be assessed. If they don't automatically do it, because they should be.
Okay. And we know that for Black women, the barriers of like you said, they do those assessments, right? It's part of their job to check and to say, hey, this is not going on. But truth be told, it becomes a check mark in the box. So doctors or OBGYN, they are screening for these things, but still not actually giving the help or the necessary resources for that Black mother that is struggling.
Oh my
Now, you just
goodness.
told us like those obvious signs, right? Laying in the bed, you're really fatigued, you're really tired, and a lot of times what I hear the wording is, I feel like I'm on autopilot, meaning like I'm just in this trance. I'm taking it day in and day out. I'm in complete just survival mode. So there's a clear indication that something is wrong. But one thing we know about Black women as well is, what about that woman that is still going to work? She is taking care of that baby. She's with the night, and she is still functioning at a high functionality level. Then how do we make sure that she gets the resources that she needs, that she is aware? Because we are so used to functioning through depression and anxiety, and we do not connect it to, hey, I just had a baby, I just went through this life altering event. Because like you said, like, to carry a baby, to birth a baby, that process, like, and I can't even personally speak on it completely. I'm just going off what I hear from other women. That process is like no other, and what it does to the body, to
What
be
it
in a
does.
state to birth another human being out of your vagina.
What it does to the body, what it does to the mind. And I think there's a number of things like we could consider with this, right? Because I mean, when we talk about, Black women continuing to function, through those feelings of depressed mood, or through, this anxiousness that we have, that Black woman's, that strong Black woman schema, of course, everything ties back to slavery. But, if you don't even want to address that and you just want to focus on present day dynamic, I often tell folks, how normal is it to talk about pregnancy in a way that is not positive? Right? Honestly.
Okay.
And then when we be very intentional within Black communities, right? You don't often hear people necessarily acknowledging tragic or traumatic experiences as it relates to pregnancy, conception, birth, or the completion of a pregnancy. You don't really hear too much of that. I remember, and my work is so passionate for me because it's both professional and personal. I am a PCOS warrior. I'm an infertility warrior, but I also, have experienced fertility treatments and child loss. So I have a very unique perspective within everything. And I remember when I was going through my own experience, reaching back and kind of talking to my mom, my grandmother, my aunts, kind of having that family sit down. And I remember finding out that my aunt had had 3 miscarriages prior to her successful rainbow baby. My other aunt had had 1 miscarriage. My mother had had 1 miscarriage, and spoke about fibroid tumors that put her in the hospital for a period of time. My grandmother talked about these tumors and not feeling so well, and, bouts of, it was just so interesting how in tragedy only did the shared experience present itself, right? It was not a conversation that was had prior to my conception or even during my fertility treatment, right? Or even before I got married or, started talking about starting a family. So I think within our households, I think it's very important to start sharing our experiences with each other, demystifying it, destigmatizing it. These things shouldn't be taboo. The statistics say for miscarriage, 1 out of every 4 pregnancies will end in a child loss. 1 out of every 4. Just base level statistic. We're not even talking about any additional implications, diagnoses, anything, right? When we talk about, postpartum depression or even perinatal mood and anxiety disorders in general, we're talking about a very large section of the population likely getting or experiencing some form of postpartum mental health. So these are not things that we talk about. And I think if we started talking about them a little bit more within our communities, within our households, we might yield a little bit of difference.
So I really appreciate you sharing your own personal experience with it. So, not like you said, there is power in your passion, right? And just having that personal experience coupled with your education and coupled with your professional experience, just realizing how much it does need to be discussed. But in 2024, I truly do believe that we are in a position to have these much needed discussions just around the tragedies that our families have endured so that we can set up not only ourselves and whatever timeline we have left, but our children. And it's not as secretive and such a taboo thing to discuss. And speaking of like that generational thing, like I said, hey, I go sit and I found out all of these different things from my grandmother, my aunts that have experienced these things. If people did more genograms, so Black communities, we come together like we are a communal race of people. So we come together for family reunions. We gather. We get our shirts with family trees. But if we did genograms, and a lot of people, and I could tell you when I was in my bachelor's and my master's, and even now with clients, people don't even know what a genogram is, which simply given is a family tree that goes in great depth of understanding generational patterns, themes, traditions, so that you understand things like adoption can be a generational things. Things like molestation, substance use, mental health. If we just understood the dynamic and then we make it and we continue to pass it down generation after generation as they continue to add, so we have somewhat of a large scope of understanding of what we are actually predisposed to. Because imagine what it does to you even further with your mental health, not knowing these things, thinking that, internalizing it, thinking it's just a you. Like somewhere I messed up. Maybe I drank too much in college. Maybe I had too much fun, just letting the guys in, whatever. you might internalize it on such a deep level that it exasperates that mental health that you have, when in reality you were already predisposed to it genetically. Like, so that just helps you prepare, and again, just add in preventative methods that will help you further down the line be ready to address it when you're ready to conceive and have a baby. So that is a whole nother topic. Like, literally, that's a whole nother topic in itself. But like you said, being able to, can we talk about it? Can we put it on the
Listen,
table so there's no shame around it?
listen, can we talk about it? Can we allow it to be conversation? Can we encourage community based education, and not just that, education of our providers as well? When we talk about society, I think there's so many historical implications attached to it, but I think one of the bigger things, one, reproductive health care has always been historically about controlling women's bodies, not necessarily about giving them freedom to use them, right? So that in itself kind of has a layer of why we're only just starting to peel back the onion on this thing, right? And then when you also think about the fact that reproductive health care, it can be looked at in more than one way. It's not exclusively a woman or a man's ability to conceive. It goes a little deeper than that, right? What about a woman and a man's ability to achieve pleasure during intimacy, physical intimacy? What about, the ability to really exist and exist in a way where they're having a fully functional life, right? When we talk about endocrine diagnosis or things like PCOS, endometriosis, erectile dysfunction, right? These are all reproductive health topics that are oftentimes kind of brushed under the rug, though, I believe it's beyond important that we talk about the maternal mortality rates and how high they are for communities of color, because it's terrible and it's embarrassing. It's downright disrespectful is the way I'm going to say it. But, I believe that these things are so problematic that they will always have a stage for conversation. But when we forget about all aspects of reproductive health care, I think sometimes we allow an open door for some of the things we thought we had solidified to become an easy target again, hence Roe versus Wade. Right? When we leave that door open, when we don't address all the things, we leave the space for things to be revisited and decisions to be remade.
And we would love to say that we've made great advancement as far as the educational component, bringing awareness to it. And I think that's the next part I really want to hit on is, what do we do as social workers when it comes to this actual topic?
Oh.
But you have to remember, like you said, Black women are still dying at the highest rate. I actually just read about Black women dying. So she had a stillborn, so her baby died. The doctor didn't address her concerns, so then she ended up dying. So the fact that Black women are still at the highest level to die during childbirth lets you know that there is still a huge gap. And Black women being able to advocate for themselves, systematic things, barriers. Like you said, just healthcare, them minimizing, them thinking that we are stronger and can tolerate higher levels of pain. And it's like, what can we do as social workers, as Black women, to continue to bring awareness to this topic, but also encourage everyday women that are out there that are pregnant to, like, hey, you are not just tired because of work. You are not just stressed because you're a baby, but like how to like really, really address this topic and address it at the head before it gets to levels of, hey, now I gotta quit my job. Now I can't get out of bed. Now I'm feeling suicidal. Now, I'm having a lot of these health disparities because, as we know as clinicians, anything psychologically that happens for too long, when those cortisone levels and adrenaline levels, stress hormones are constantly activated, it will then turn into physical symptoms. So all of the headaches, the migraines, the pains in the stomach, clenching of teeth, just so many different physical things, somatic things start to happen when we don't even address the psychological things, because we are worked with the perspective that the black women is superwoman and we can muscle through it all. And we can't take a break, and we can't ask for help, and we can't be struggling because, like you said, there's so much shame around what it means to have a child and to admit in front of other mothers, I'm tired, or I don't feel a connection, or I don't want to do it. It's so much shame, and that's another thing. So those two things, let's
So
get on
I
the social
think,
work, and
oh my
let's get there.
gosh, that is multi-layered because
Yeah.
the oh my goodness. So when we talk about what we can do as black women, I think the first thing, first and foremost, is we have to open the floor to curiosity and accountability. And it's going to sound crazy that I say accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes when I talk about my or consider my reproductive story, because everyone
Mm-hmm.
has one, right? Or my experiences, right? I compare it to kind of like being in a basketball court, right? I was sitting on a sideline. Did I say that these things were a problem? Absolutely. Did I see the problem? Absolutely. Did I recognize when appropriate? Yeah, this is a problem and we need to do something about it. But what happened when the game ended? I went home, right?
Yeah.
I continued on my merry way. It
Mm-hmm.
did not become a real life experience for me until it was my real life experience, right? So I believe the first step as black women is to, one, acknowledge your real life experiences, because oftentimes we all exist in these things, and we don't attempt to wear our trauma as a trophy, but we
Mm-hmm.
also normalize these seasons of sacrifice and suffering within our communities sometimes, right? So I think just allowing ourselves to be genuine and share our stories. Hey, this happened to me. This
Mm-hmm.
hurt. This, I'm indifferent about what the experience even was because I don't know how to describe it. But this is what it was 40 years ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 seconds ago. Speaking your truth and sharing with the community so we can all acknowledge, oh my gosh, so this is deeper than just who's on today's news, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that accountability. And then we switch over to curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maintaining a curiosity, not just about your experience, but the experience of others. What interventions are available? And if they're not available, where's the gap,
Yeah.
right? As social workers, the number one thing we is good at, okay, is spotting some shade and spotting a problem. So, use, if we have any kind of superpowers, that would be it. We can spot shade and we can spot issues. So in spotting the issues, then we have the ability with curiosity, with accountability, right?
Uh-huh.
And then with competence about these populations, right? We have the ability to combine that curiosity and that competence to become a change agent. And then we can move into action and we can train. This is what I call my ACT C3 method, right? So this is what it looks like for social workers to get busy. We're not a study of profession. We are the action of profession. So we don't just talk about it, we walk about it, right? So we got
Yes.
to get active. We have to get involved. And sometimes that means uncomfortably getting off the sideline bleachers, getting out of the stands, and coming
Mm-hmm.
down to the court, right? And if you don't know how to play ball, asking the person next to you to give you a quick lesson and moving, because we got work to do. Come to warm-ups, come to drills, come do your conditioning, right? Get
Mm-hmm.
put on a team. Let's get it.
It's working.
That's what it looks like sometimes. And I think as a black woman, I can say, and not speaking on behalf of all of us, but I'm just thinking out loud, right? We're so used to being strong, having all the answers, being forced to endure, endure for the night. Joy comes in the morning, being forced to endure, that we don't consider We don't have to live in survival anymore. We can move the needle towards thriving. And a part of thriving looks like changing the conditions that we set in our foundation to survive. We don't have to do that anymore. So let's talk about it. Let's make it an issue. Let's actively make a change in it. If y'all ain't gonna work, let us work. And I also believe allyship is very important as well. And it sounds interesting because oftentimes when we have issues within our community, we will rally together to rally. But my unpopular opinion is that we'll rally, but we rally and we rah-rah, but we're forgetting that others see the experience as well. It's okay to allow allies to join the walk. It's okay to allow allies to say this is wrong and they don't look like you and they don't share your experience. It's okay to say that because we're still allowing ourselves to get into these spaces where we can make these effective changes. We're kicking down doors and flipping tables in rooms, but until we can get in the room, ain't nothing we can do. Right? Listen, listen. Kicking down doors, flipping tables, knocking over chairs, okay? And it's just fine, if that's how, you want to move, but there's an importance attached to allyship. It's okay for a man to speak to the experience of women. It is okay for a person that is not a person of color to actually sit in a true position of allyship to amplify the voices of those they see, right? That actually exists. So we have to be willing to accept that support and encourage that support because we can make as much noise as we want, but we can magnify it if we allow others to sit at the table and have those conversations and amplify those issues with us. And the last time this was evidenced was back during the women's rights movement, ironically back when the reproductive justice framework was made by a table of Black women. Right? That allowed allies to the table. Right? So we have to consider we can do this and it can be effective, but we just have to be willing to take that step.
I agree with you. And this is why I agree with why we do need that collaboration in those allies because as people of color, we are still the marginalized group, right? The majority of the doctors that we will still see as Black women will not look like us. So we need people on those medical boards. We need those people at the state level, and we need those people at the national level advocating for our rights as Black women. Because, like you said, we can take it back to the women rights movement, where as Black people, they didn't even think we were human. We were like 1/3. But even as women, didn't think we had rights whatsoever. So we need people in high position of power to advocate on our genuine behalf. Genuine. Do you hear that? Genuine. So not someone that's trying to stand and say, hey, I understand their experience, because they would never understand our experience because they've never lived our life. But they empathize and sympathize with us to a great degree that they are willing to, like you said, magnify our concerns to make sure that the policies, the laws, that things that's happening in Texas with women reproduction does not happen. And that is what happened when you have a lot of white privileged men advocating for rights to a woman's body that they know nothing about, or they don't understand the different layers that comes with women reproduction. And then when we start breaking it down culturally, they don't understand. So yes, we need it for the sake of all of these things, for like those big societal changes. We need them on our side.
Yeah. And a way to create community with that, oftentimes I tell folks that it's very easy to create division, right? Because we can create division based on anything. Girl, your locks aren't as blonde. My locks aren't as blonde as yours. Here goes the sweet divide right there, right? Like we can create division based on anything, but it's very difficult to create commonalities sometimes. And I tell people to consider leaning into the commonalities, right? The commonalities are the statistics, the realities, right? Now, we are always going to amplify these daring, disrespectful, out the way statistics as it relates to the Black woman and the maternal experience, because it shouldn't be like this. But it's also important to say, hey, 11% of couples in the US struggle with infertility. 11% of men in the US struggle with erectile dysfunction. 33% of military men struggle with erectile dysfunction. 1 out of every 8 women, 1 out of 8 has experienced infertility. Right? Like these heavy numbers, these things that say, oh my gosh, it's not just me. Yeah. Right? PCOS is the highest impactful diagnosis for women's overall health and reproductive health as it relates to fertility in the country. Highest. This is a commonality. All of these things are commonalities that we can rally together and say, hey, these are problems that don't just impact your community or don't just impact my community. They impact all of us. There goes your commonality. So now, how do we use our commonality to not only talk about these common things that are problems, but enhance the issues that we see on our side and you see on yours? Because there is space for all of our issues to have solutions. But it takes all of us to make them.
And we have to work together.
And we have to, listen, we got to do something together. If we independently could have, I dare to say, and I guess I'm just thinking out loud at this point, if we could control this situation on our own, would this even be a problem?
No.
You picking up what I'm putting down?
If we can control prenatal mental health, would this even be a problem?
No. Right? Like, we wouldn't be having these experiences in any capacity. So that means there's a level of yield that we have to have when it comes to this. There's a part of the system that we don't control. There's a part of the experience that we don't have our hands on. And the question then is, who does? And how do we influence change, not only in the way we perceive the experience, but the way they perceive the experience and create it?
Yeah. So
you know?
What do we have as social workers? Like, who have the hands in the pot? And that's where social workers are really important, because we need us in those research labs, right? Put in Black women in the interventions that they're giving us to solve these problems that are not actually working, because our numbers are still high. We need social workers that are in the community, starting nonprofit organizations that's raising money so that we can even have our research published, so that we can have programs that is out there bringing awareness and education. Because you said something really important not too long. You said we need to start with accountability and curiosity, right?
Right.
But what happens when the Black woman cannot hold herself accountable because she doesn't even know that this is a thing? She can't connect it, because you have to understand, with Black trauma, that dissociation that happens, that disconnected to that memory. So there's a lot of times that I'm in session with clients, and it's not until, and I mean clients in their 30s, 40, 50, 60, it's not until right there in that session that I say, hey, you know that's racial trauma? Hey, you know that's medical trauma? Hey, you know that's childhood trauma? Like, they don't even connect it.
Right.
That this is a thing. So even when they experience these traumatic tragedies, like you said, your grandmother, your aunt, they didn't talk about it, because sometimes people don't even connect it to even being the reason why they are showing up in present day, exhibiting the certain symptoms. So we need social workers to be out there to even educate, so that it even lights a flame in their head to say, you know what? Maybe this is happening to me. Let me inquire with my doctor. Let me inquire with a friend. Let me inquire and have this conversation with my family. Or we still are at ground zero. with it. So you see social workers
Listen.
everywhere in the advocacy part of policy, like social workers. That's why we're so. I mean, we're a big Draco. Okay, we're so heavily needed. But people don't even know how to utilize us in the capacity when it comes to just this very thing. They think, hey, put us in CPS and DHS and and APS. But right here, you just ask how on all
So
levels. We need them.
listen, it's all of the energy for me, okay? Let's make that clear. It's all of the things, all of the questions. And I love that you asked it. Thank you. So, my research, I remember being in my doctoral program and, just really following my own experience and then the experience of others, because I was still a clinician when I went through this, right? So, considering the experiences my clients had and like, wow, where are we? Why are we not involved? Matter of fact, I dare to even say, where is mental health? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Social workers for sure, because that's the set I rep. But
Yeah.
where is mental health, and why are we so absent, or why is our chair so far back from the table? It looks like we're not sitting there, And when I started doing the research, you would be shocked how many studies basically stated that, there's a focus on reproductive rights and reproductive justice, but not reproductive health care as a service provision, right? So oftentimes, social workers have this misconception that they're not reproductive health care providers, right? Because that's the doc's job, right?
Yeah.
That's the
It's so
nurse's
easy,
job,
right?
right?
Yeah.
That's not my
Mm-hmm.
gig. Not realizing that we're talking about correlation of perinatal mental health. We're talking about connection of people and systems. We're talking about connection of people and resources. We're talking about supporting people in managing grief. It may not be grief of a person, but grief of an experience, right? So that's all of our business, right? And even if you don't want to touch direct care practice, because I understand there's different flavors of social work, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have your macro providers that, do a lot of the grassroots work, getting a hold of these policies, looking at the inequities that exist within them, advocating for the needs of the clients from the social workers that are on the ground floor doing the work, and allowing for these advocacy efforts for these grant writing opportunities and research opportunities and lobbying and all these different things. But the problem is that social work forgets that we have a seat at the table, and if we don't sit in it, then what? Right?
What?
And the reason I say we don't sit in it, right? Because I don't want, listen, I don't want y'all getting hot with me thinking I'm talking trash. Okay, let me give you a couple receipts. A study conducted by Winter 2017 is the citation. A study conducted by him. He surveyed a bunch of MSW students, and the survey was about reproductive related topics and the students' perceptions. Right? There were students that endorsed, and when I say like these stats are wild, these stats are wild. There were students that endorsed that people should not have the right to have access to an abortion. If people should not have the right to have a abortion funded by an insurance or the government if they can't afford it. Social work students said that they hadn't been exposed to reproductive health care topics within the classroom or in field education. But they endorsed being extremely competent, knowing that they would be able to handle the situation post-grad.
Of course.
Right? Social work students endorsed, these very biased perceptions, saying they don't believe they could support a client if the client chose a decision that didn't align with their own beliefs, right? So when I talk about having a seat at the table, right, we're talking about that acknowledgement and that accountability piece. We're talking about those two concepts right there. If we don't allow ourselves as social workers the opportunity to sit in a place of curiosity, after first saying this is a problem that we should be involved in, right? And our ethics don't get to determine what the issue is or not. And when I say our ethics, I don't mean the profession, our personal ethics, right? A lot of the research I found endorsed that social workers look at reproductive health care or reproductive justice and rights efforts as these are personal things. These are not things that as social workers we are involved in. And we have to remind ourselves that, that good old code of ethics, to be very specific, 6.04, okay, that code talks about our ethical obligation to the community at large to engage in research, to engage and support and be engaged in social advocacy and justice efforts, particularly as it relates to marginalized populations. And marginalized populations are not limited to racial, demographic, socioeconomic status, disability, or inability. It can be something as simple as I'm struggling to have a baby. It can be something as large as the maternal mortality rate. It could be something as overlooked as erectile dysfunction among men, right? We don't get to pick our marginalized populations, right? Like, so a code of ethics says we're obligated to do all the work, right? So the first thing we have to do as social workers is acknowledge that we do have a seat at the table, right? Maybe it wasn't there by design, but we have the ability to sit there and support. And we can support in so many different ways. We can do direct care practice where we're working with these clients. We can do macro-oriented work where we're doing a lot of the lobbying, the advocacy, the community-based education, right? We can even go so far as to sit at the table, develop a sense of competence, right, about the subject at large, develop a sense of confidence about the experiences our clients are having, and then provide consultation to the folks that are sitting at this table who may not understand those concepts the way we do.
Drop mic.
Listen, I ain't trying to drop the mic, but I'm just saying.
You just said a word. Those stats, I can agree on those stats because one thing we do as social workers is we're always looking for the gaps. And the gaps constantly come from our education to the actual application of these theories, these interventions, this research. And like you said, in the social work field, we can focus so much on individual without looking at the larger scale, the systematic scale. Because it's so easy to remove ourselves from different categories because, like you said, marginalization is not necessarily based on just one factor, race. It's numerous that can easily put you in the category of marginalization, meaning like, hey, don't wait until something happens to you to say something and do something. Do something now. But people have to know, and I think this is the importance, and I really do thank you for just coming on here and sharing it because this is the purpose of this platform, to really talk about those different areas in which social workers is embedded in, and how us as social workers, even if this is not our specialty, how do we do our due diligence, our obligation, even in the roles that we have, that is still not oppressing this issue that we have and continuing this issue that we have. And it might just be, hey, a conversation. It might be educating your client. It might be doing a speaking engagement on this topic, even though this is not your specialty. But there are so many ways that we can enact change to let people know, because people are still not ready for social workers in the capacity and what we bring to the table. And you told me something earlier off camera just about the perspective that social workers come with, because we don't just look at one factor. We don't look at the black or the white side of things. We work right in the middle, and we consider every contextual piece of somebody, every intersectionality identity. We consider so many parts of people and systems and communities that we're able to make some really valid program suggestions, consultations, but we can't do that if we can't even start with the education. Because, like you said, I've never learned. I can say now, on no level of my education have I learned about perinatal mental health. On no level.
Listen, and I'll go a step further, right? at any point in your education were you encouraged to go through a human sexuality and behavior course?
No.
Right?
No.
A lot of folks forget that's an obvious aspect of reproductive health care, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about social work and education, right? When we know, awesome social work. Did you know Stedman Graham was a social worker?
No.
Girl, Oprah Stedman, yes. Shout out to Stedman Graham, BSW social worker. Stand up, right? As Stedman Graham, yes, girl. As he told me last year, okay? You cannot enact change in social work without resources to enact change. So the more you know, the more you develop, the more you obtain, the more change you're able to make. And so when we talk about just this basic concept of what do we do, your first step, social worker, is to allow yourself to build accountability, acknowledge that this is a space that could utilize your support, right? And then become curious. Get curious, ask the questions. If you don't have, this is not the type of, what is it? You have to have this experience in order to join this team. Absolutely not. We want everybody on this team. We want a whole bench worth of people ready to go, replace somebody that then got tired and need to get some water on the sidelines, right? We want a bench worth of people. And guess what? We want social workers sitting on that bench as well. We want social workers in the starting five. Right? Because at the end of the day, think of first draft pick for real though, because we manage programs. We improve programming. We provide interventions. We encourage education. We facilitate conversations. Right? We provide direct patient care. Who would be the first person that someone would need to talk to? It would be beneficial for someone to talk to in the case of a tragedy, right? Somebody that has the capacity to hold space and facilitate that conversation, allowing everyone to be respected and maintain a level of ethical excellence that I dare, because I'm biased, say no other profession has, right? We need us.
Even that woman that experienced that tragedy, she becomes an expert in her experience, and she becomes an advocate for other women that are enduring similar experiences, that commonality. So even for those that's listening that are outside of the social work field, they're just Black women that have experience. They understand what this is like. They can talk about how they got out of it. They can discuss the resources, the community. They can discuss the conversation, the questions they ask your doctors. They can discuss what it means to put your foot on the doctor's neck to listen. They need to team up with us too. They have a voice that needs to be heard, and they can do work alongside with us, and even to a greater degree, because like you said, we got code of ethics. We got red tape. We got some red tape. But somebody that is not a part of our discipline have full range to go in any direction that they see fit.
And I love that you brought it up, because so when I talk about that basketball concept, right, the team and its varying differences, right, aka a multidisciplinary team and or interdisciplinary team, right, we have the capacity to make impactful change, but we have to be willing to move forward with allyship. We have to be willing to allow other people to sit at the table, but also take our rightful place too. We don't need to stand in the hallway and say, if you need me, let me know. Why we not in the room? Why we not sitting down? Now, why we not, rah-rah with everybody else, developing an understanding of what's going on, so as a team we can engage this issue, right? I believe not only for social work, but just in general, when we talk about reproductive health care, we have to look at the totality of it. It is not limited to the maternal mortality rate, nor is it it's not so big that everyone doesn't have the opportunity to have their words heard. And it's also not so limited that we only have the ability to hyper focus on one thing. Because if we do either or, we're creating more marginalized populations. I remember going through my experience with the infertility, with the fertility treatments, with the child loss, and the number one thing I felt, even though I'm a clinician and know better, I felt alone. I felt I got on the court, y'all. I got on the court because it was life or death for me. This was real, right? I was at risk for sepsis. So I completely understood that young lady's story, right? Because I literally remember those moments, right? So when we talk about developing that fire, that enthusiasm to get to work, it is okay for your fire, your enthusiasm to be based in curiosity and allyship. You don't have to go through the experience personally. I'm a firm believer in pain is almost like a Pandora's box that's about full. It starts to overflow. And even if you haven't walked in my shoes and you don't know my journey, it is possible for you to feel my pain because it may be overflowing, right? And if we're all in this space where we see this is hurting all of us, it's causing concern, it's okay to allow the pain to overflow and other people to be touched because that's a catalyst for change. Let's all make some stuff shake.
I mean, statistically, generational trauma wouldn't be a thing if we couldn't feel the pain of our ancestors. And when we were going through that Black Lives Matter, and we were going through our Black men and Black women being killed at the hands of police officers, we felt that pain. That was a collective trauma. So, like you said, you don't have to. You don't even have to have someone close to you going through that. But when you see someone that looks like you, we automatically feel that pain. Because I have some stories about the pain, the wrenching, gut-wrenching pain of watching my brothers, my sisters that I have never met go through some very traumatic experiences. So, like you said, we can all, it doesn't matter. If we're here to do the work, our whole purpose is to reproduce. That's why we got it. It's to reproduce, but to be a service to all. If you're not living a life of service, what are you actually doing? And that statement in itself, you can conceptualize it in so many different forms because it doesn't mean you're out, you're in the front, you're on Capitol Hill doing whatever you're doing. It could be anything, but there are so many ways that you can contribute to society in a very humane, respectful, curious way that will help out tons and thousands of people. And sometimes we might not see it in our lifetime, but the work you do today might help the next generation of people behind you, even once you're gone. Because one thing about this platform that I will be illuminated even more is those Black pioneer social workers that are dead and gone, but have left major imprints on our field because they do exist. And even though the omission of our voices and everything that we bring to the table, they want to keep in a box, baby. We're bringing it out. We're showing it, and that's what we're doing right now in this moment. Like I so much I value this moment right now. I value that now we can put it out there because we're in such an era that you can put this out there and millions of people could listen to it, could come out, could be inspired to want to leave this conversation and go do something about it. I
Yeah.
love the access that we have to be able to put this out there to millions of people.
And
Just
all I ask is at the end of the day, you hear it and allow yourself to hear, allow yourself to feel it. Because oftentimes, I go around, I do a lot of presenting and speaking and teaching. Why? Because I had to, right? I got on the court. I'm tired. I'm going to need a bottle of water eventually. So I'm going to need somebody ready to step up. So in my mind, I am training, serving, supporting, consulting with, I am educating my replacement. right? Because eventually I'm gonna want to sit down. That time ain't
You
coming
do
no
it.
time soon. Butter up. You know what I'm saying? Like listen, I might be supporting my colleague that's gonna help me in this effort. I may be supporting my replacement. I like I it, at the end of the day, I think it's very important for us to remember that a part of our that what those other duties as assigned that goes on the end of every job description is that we give voice to those that are so low that others can't hear them. We give voice. That's one of our biggest gigs. We give voice. It don't cost you nothing to say this is an issue and we need to do something about it. And if you aren't the subject matter expert or you don't feel that confidence yet, it's okay to yield it to your social worker on your left or your right. It's okay to acknowledge that organization, that stakeholder, right? That's in your community that's doing that kind of work. It's okay to say, ooh, this is a level of ignorance for me. I might need I might need to maybe CEUs, maybe get a better understanding. This topic is becoming so prevalent. Most CEU providers have something available, right?
And if not, they can come and find you. I know
Absolutely.
Miss Sadora Williams in Portland, Oregon. Shout her out because she does a lot of this work in the community with mothers in their hospital. And I mean, people like you, like, even if you have more people in this field, please give me their information. I would drop it in the comment box so people know where to go to get that education, even if it's foundation. You don't
Yeah.
always have to pay for things. When people have personal and professional experience coupled, you have like some of the best tools that you can ask. Because sometimes these trainers, they're not even created by us, but we're
Mm-hmm.
following them.
Listen.
So just go to the right person, ask the right question.
You right, and I'm a firm believer in connection, right? So if you want to connect with me, I am on LinkedIn. Feel free to check me out, Dr. Olymphia O'Neale-White. You will see me there in yellow. I am also on LinkedIn at Through My Lens Consulting. You can also find me on Facebook through my Lens Consulting business page. In all of these pages, I am wearing bright yellow. I'm really obvious, right? If you're interested in, having me come and speak to your organization, trying to provide that education, I have no problem doing that. Hit me up on my website through my lens through my lens consulting services.com. And because I dare to be different, there's an E at the end of lens. Um, and just get connected, right? Some actionable items. Consider looking into, a local resource in your state, right? Postpartum Support International is your number one resource when we talk about anything related to the maternal experience, right? They cover all populations. They're so committed, right, to serving communities of color. They created a exclusive BIPOC 2-day training that is hosted in Arizona, one of the most progressive states as it relates to maternal mental health and increasing health outcomes in a positive way right now. Like there is a 2-day components of training focused only on the BIPOC community. Only people of color are the instructors, and only people of color are the participants, right? Like, if you're interested in, my specialty, child loss, grief, infertility, some of those endocrine diagnoses like PCOS and things like that, feel free to hit me up. I can point you in the direction to some trainings. But PESI has things available. CE for Less has things available. Clearly Clinical has a 1-hour training that's for free. Okay. And TPN also has a training. Don't play with it. I come with receipts. Let's get it. Like, y'all, I need you on my team. I need you invested. I need the backup. I need the support. We need the support in this work. We can't do it without you. Too many people are at stake. Too many experiences can be tainted by us not acting. I need you to act. Let's get it.
Well, thank you so much, everything that you just brought to the conversation. I feel full in my in my spirit. I feel really good. I feel inspired. Like you even got me on the verge of I'm like it's sad because this is our sad reality, but I nonetheless I feel so gracious right now in this moment that we did this, and I can't wait to have you back again so we can continue to dive more into social work, okay? But thank you for everything that you have given this platform today. If there's any last thing you want to say, any last tidbit you want to say, let me know before we end
Oh
this
my
call.
goodness. No, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity. Thank you, Risa, for inviting me and really just having this conversation. Reproductive health, gosh, death, all these things are really hard to talk about. And the fact that you're making this space and you're allowing, us to have these tough conversations that lead to change is so beautiful. So thank you for having me. I'm so grateful. Appreciate you.
My deep, 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 deep pleasure. All right. Okay, you guys, we are wrapping it up, and I will see you guys next week. And I always say see you guys as if y'all can see me. You can't see me, but you can hear me, okay? But I'm sure you can imagine me. Use your imagination. All right. Okay, let me